Alright, so in this one, we're going to be showing you how to take the front and rear wheels off of a dirt bike. Additionally, I'm going to be showing you how to retighten the chain once you put the rear wheel on, lube the chain, and complete the entire process as easy as possible. So the bike I'm going to be working on specifically today to do this entire thing is a Crf250x Honda. It's a 2012 model year. So as you can see, as I've done, I've put it up on 2 cinder blocks. Ideally, you're going to want to have a stand for the bike, but I do not, and you by no means need one. You just need something sturdy and 2 people to get it up there. That's mostly why I've done it beforehand, is because it's not a one-man job, especially if you have a 250cc or higher bike. They're just too heavy. But once you have the bike off the ground with the rear tire just barely above and the front tire also off the ground, we're going to go ahead and get started by taking off this front dust cover here. Alright, so to take this dust cover off, all we're going to need to do is take out the 2 Allen bolts right here and right here. They're both size 5, so I'm just going to go ahead and take those out right now. Alright, so once you have the dust cover fully off, that's going to expose the brake. And so what we're going to need to go in and do is take off this right here and this right here. Those 2 bolts are going to loosen this entire section, the whole caliper piece, and you're going to be able to then take it all the way off and separate it from the rest of the wheel. So this isn't just going to entirely pull off from the disc itself. Alright, so I've gone ahead and removed the 2 bolts that went to that. These are just 10 millimeters. Go ahead and pull those out with the ratchet, and then this will just pull back off. It's going to need a little shimming to get it back out, but it'll come right off. Once you've gone ahead and you've pulled this separate, the last thing you're going to need to do is loosen these 2 bolts right on top here. Those 2 put tension on the rod that goes across. And on the other side, there's a similar set. Just another 2 right here. So we're going to go ahead and loosen those 4 all up. Don't fully take them out, just loosen them. And then once we're done with that, we're going to go ahead and pull this all the way off and use the back of a flathead or whatever tool you have laying around to just knock it back out. And then the wheel will be fully off. Alright, so I've gone ahead and loosened those 2 up, as well as these 2. And I've come to the most important part of any project, in which you realize you left the tool you need at a friend's house, or you lost it, or never owned it in the first place. So you got to take a trip to the hardware store and do that. So I'm going to pick up with you there when we go ahead and get the right millimeter size ratchet we need to pull that bolt back out. Woo! Alright, I'm back, and I now have the correct socket for this. You need a 22 millimeter socket for the front and a 34 millimeter for the rear. That would be that one, but we'll get to that at a later point. So I'm just going to go ahead and break the axle nut loose now that I have everything else all separated off and loosened. Alright, so gone ahead and taken that nut off. I have that here. And so once that nut is off, you're going to go ahead and take some tool of choice. I'm just going to be using the back of this for now and then a flathead after. And just go ahead and knock the axle through to the other side. Alright, so I just cut the tape because I needed 2 hands there for a second, but essentially all you're going to do is tap that again and it'll pop out on the other side. And then this piece will be showing, this extended piece, and you can just go ahead and pull it out from there and it'll come loose, and then you'll have your entire wheel separate and ready to go. But one important thing to note is when you have the front wheel off, there's going to be a spacer right here. Now this spacer likes to stick in generally, but if you're transporting this, like putting it in your trunk or something, it could come out and get lost, and then the wheel will not fit. And so that's something you definitely don't want to have happen. So you're going to want to go ahead and separate that out if you're transporting this anywhere. But I am putting it back on, so I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing in reverse. We're going to line up this on the inside, and then we're going to put the wheel in with the spacer in there, line it up, put the axle back through, and then I'll pick up when we have the axle back through. All right, so all I've done is thrown the axle most of the way in. As you can see, it's still sticking out here. And so what I wanted to note at this point is that while you don't have these axles on here, you can actually turn this and separate this piece away, or so that way you can lift the wheel up, align it how you want it, and set it back up. So what you're gonna do in this process is just work to get that axle to line up perfectly, to get it all the way through, and then you're gonna push this until it's flush against the wall. And then once you have all that set up, we're just gonna go ahead and hand tighten the 22mm nut that goes on the end of the axle, and then we'll tighten it up fully after that. Alright, so now I have the axle fully in, as you can see, and then all I've done is retighten these top 4 10mm bolts right here, starting with the outside, just tightening it until you feel any tension at all, then the outside on this side, and repeating with the inside, and then fully tightening up just to make sure that you have even pressure across the axle. Then we're going to go ahead and fully tighten up the axle nut itself to whatever spec your bike has designated in your owner's manual. Although I don't have the proper tool for that here, so I'm going to do that before I ride next. Although all you really have to do is get the correct wrench that'll tell you what spec you're torquing it to and how many foot-pounds, and just go ahead and tighten it until it tells you you are at the right spec. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish this up and then pick up back when we go and throw the brake back on. Alright, so now we need to reattach the brake onto the disc. However, this can be a little bit tricky because I don't know how well this is showing up on camera, but your 2 brake pads in there have a small gap between them, and when you pull it off, if you put any pressure on this plate right here where my fingers are, then you could have pushed them together, and that'll make it so it won't fit onto here. So what you're going to want to do is take a flathead, just like I have right here, just a big old flathead. You're going to want to push it in between the 2 pads on this side here, and you're just going to want to gently pry them apart so you have enough room to slide it on. Then all we're going to do is slide it back onto its place here on the wheel, as you can see, and reinstall those 2 10mm bolts to hold it in place. So I'm just going to go ahead and slide it back on. Alright, so now we're going to be working on the back wheel. And the first thing we're going to want to do in order to get the back wheel off is come around here, and you're going to want to break off this nut closest to the weld over here. You want to break off that nut and loosen it all the way back to the end, and then go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. And what this is going to do is going to go ahead and make sure that you can slide the wheel forward, totally forward, and then you'll have plenty of play in your chain, so that way when you go ahead and break everything loose, you can pull the wheel off. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that right now. Alright, so with this side loosened up, we have plenty of space in there, and the other side loosened up, all you're going to want to do is go in here and break this nut loose. Now, this is going to be a 32mm socket, and I think I misspoke before and said 34, but it's definitely a 32. All you're going to do is slap it on here and then go ahead and break it loose. Although this can be easier said than done because some of these are on here super tight, especially if you don't take the rear wheel off ever. They'll be on here extremely tight. So I'd recommend putting the bike back down on level surface, setting your socket up on there like so, and then giving this end of the socket a hard kick to break it loose, and then going back in and fully loosening it off by hand. Either way, that's all you need to do essentially to tighten your chain or to start the process of pulling the wheel all the way off. But if you're just here to tighten the chain, all you're gonna have to do from here is slide the wheel back or in forward to get yourself all this slack here, or tighten the chain up fully. And what you're gonna wanna do is, once you have this as far back as you can get it, and to get this nice and tight to the amount of slack you want, then you just gotta tighten this bolt back out until it touches right here up against this, and that'll ensure that it's not gonna move around at all, and it'll hold the wheel at the distance you want it out, which will keep the chain as tight as you want it. So if that's all you're here to do, just pull the wheel back until you have it to the tension you want, and then pull this back out until it's up against here, and that'll have it fully adjusted to the tension you want. And you gotta make sure that you match it on the other side. You can do it by counting threads or measuring it or eyeball it if you've done it before, although I don't know why you'd be here if you've done it before. Either way, I'm just gonna go ahead and fully pull that back off and then get the axle out and start taking the wheel off. But I'm gonna leave you guys over here to watch that part. Alright, so all I've done is gone ahead and pulled that axle out, and in pulling that out, it'll free you up the ability to push the wheel forward in more, and when you push that wheel all the way in, you'll be able to go ahead and pull the chain off. So just a quick summary of everything you need to do to get this back wheel off. Go ahead, bring these in so you can loosen the chain up a bunch. Break that nut loose, take it all the way off, and then go ahead and hammer the axle out a bit so that way it's on the other side. Pull the axle all the way out, slide the wheel forward, and pull the chain off. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the wheel all the way back on, and then we'll be finished up here. I'll again go over tightening the chain when I tighten it up myself, but I'll pick up in a second when I can get this wheel and the axle back in fully. Alright, so this is the last thing you're really going to need to be careful about when you're doing this. When you're putting the axle back in order to get it to go fully in, you're going to have to be pretty careful of getting this to line up. So essentially you'll see how this part's flat on the top and bottom, and you need that to line up to fit into these slots. And then when you do that, you'll be able to get it to fit in here, and this will lock the axle facing one way, so that way when you tighten it on the other side, you're not just spinning the axle in there. So all I'm going to do is go ahead and back that side out a bit, get some play in this so that way I can get it to fit upright, and then go ahead and just push it back through. So now we have that lined up nice and flush. We have it nice and flush over here too. So we're going to want to go back and insert this square piece. I'm a little all over the place. Let me give you guys a better look. Alright, so this square piece is going to sit flush over top this. Then you're going to need your washer, and then the actual axle nut itself. So let me just get these on here loosely. And now that you have these all on here loosely, you'll still have play in the wheel, and that you can move it forward and back. As you can see, I'm sliding it here. I'll give you a better look. See, this actually slides back and forth, and that's what's going to do the tensioning of your chain. So when you have it all the way forward, you'll need less slack and your chain will be loose. Or if you have it all the way back, it'll be about as tight as it can go. But right now, since we have the chain just hanging off the sprocket here, we want to push it all the way forward with our leg. This is what I'm doing, just pushing it forward with my knee. And then you're going to want to go ahead over here, and starting at the bottom, just line the chain back up onto the sprocket, and it'll push itself right back in. Needs a little finagling to get it to work, and it's a lot easier with two hands, so I'm actually going to put you down for a second and come back. But essentially all we're doing here is just making sure that this is all the way seated back on the sprocket. So just get to doing this. So now that we have this all the way back on and fully in to the sprocket, we're gonna go ahead and pull it back to make sure it's tight. And then we're gonna go ahead and loosen that, loosen the bolt all the way back and then tighten the nut down to hold it in place. And we're gonna wanna do this on both sides and measure to make sure that they fit. And I'll pick up once we have that all tightened back up. All right, so once you have this to the tension you want, you're gonna go ahead and use your 12mm on this one while you hold the 10mm on this one to make sure that it stays at the tension you have it at, and go ahead and fully tighten that up, and then you're good to go. So once you have both sides fully tightened up, you're just gonna wanna go ahead and tighten this by hand, then pull it onto the ground and tighten it fully, and then you're done. You have both wheels fully back on and your chain is fully tight and you're good to go.